Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this presentation. It's titled Enhance Your AR Automation for Sage. I actually like to think of this as AR avoidance just because of the way our product functions. It's our customer portal for Sage 300. So just to take you through a couple of introductory slides before I get into an actual live presentation. North49 has been in the Sage world for a long time. The principals in the organization have been doing this for 30 plus years, myself included, under different organizations. Of course, I actually spent some time with Sage, about 8 years with Sage, and with different software publishers that integrate with Sage. So we do have a very deep domain expertise about how to integrate into Sage. So specifically Sage 300, we also do work with Sage Intacct. We have a full integrated web store for Sage 300, as well as our customer portal, which is what we're going to be talking about today. About a year and a half ago, North49 was acquired by a much larger company called Global Payments. And so we're now a division of that organization, which essentially means that we are now able to provide that end-to-end payment experience from customer facing right into getting that payment taken and then inserted directly into Sage. And we'll talk about that, and I'll show you that essentially live when we get through the product presentation. So the way we help your organization is to save you time in how you accept payments from your customers and how you present their invoices to them and other things that live inside of their account in Sage. It's essentially a self-serve means for your customers to help themselves, to do it on their own time. They don't have to wait to speak to someone at your organization, and in order to be able to look up an order status, look up an invoice, pay that invoice. It's all done on their own time in an automated process, and it all flows directly into Sage. And again, I'm going to show you this live. So the beauty of this is it saves you time, it saves you money, it's a convenience for your customers, and it gives them self-service, which is something that typically your customers want. So there's a benefit for the customers. It means that they can do what they need to do 24/7. They don't have to wait for someone to be available in your organization to pick up the phone and talk to them or to answer an email. They get to do it on their own time. And the benefit for you is fairly significant as well, because it does reduce all that administrative overhead with dealing with those tasks with your customers. And if you move most of these processes to an electronic means, you also eliminate all the paper, the postage, the stuffing, all the labor, time, and paper expense that goes along with doing that. So making that transition to this automated online process has significant benefits for you, not just saving time, but also saving money. We designed the customer portal so that it requires little to no training on your customers. And I hope you'll see that when I show you the customer facing side of the portal. Once it's set up, it just does what it does essentially automatically, and there's nothing that you need to do to make sure that it does its thing. We read and feed live from Sage 300. We have a component we call Connect. It just sits on your Sage server waiting for us to ask it a question from the portal. It interrogates Sage through a Sage user license. Do bear that in mind. We do require a Sage user license in order for the communication to work, but then it does everything else automatically. So it's nothing you have to worry about. There is an administrative portal that goes along with this that you will have access to, referring to it as the merchant portal. We won't have time to show that to you today, but if it's something you want to have a look at after the fact, let me know. Let the folks at BAS know. We can arrange to give you a look at that. And it's designed to work on any device. So regardless of the device that your customer is using, be it a cell phone or be it a 36-inch monitor on their desk, the interface is going to adapt appropriately so that it gives them a display that works well for the device that they happen to be using. Enough talking about it. Let's actually go in and show you what the product looks like. And I'm going to start with a fairly simple concept, and we call this our click to pay. And what this does is it allows you to embed a link. It can be right on your Sage invoice document, so you can have this embedded directly on that invoice document. You can have it in an email. I've got it here on a Word document just to show you how this works. And so you see as I hover over that link, you can see what the link is. So first of all, it points to the URL that will be the domain for your customer portal. It's not going to be our domain. It's going to be a subdomain of your current web domain. So it might be, customer.mydomain.com or portal.mydomain.com, whatever you want that subdomain to be. That's what we will have your portal be pointing to. And with that, we also point to the customer number, which is their AR account number in Sage, as well as the document number. In this case, it's the invoice number. So from a customer perspective, they just click on that link, and basically what happens is we'll then pop up. Maybe what you saw was when I first fed this in here, it fed in both the customer number here and the invoice number. There was a slight delay as we went to Sage, checked to make sure that that is in fact an invoice for that customer, and then there's still an outstanding balance on it. And if all those things are true, we'll fill in all this additional information here, including how much is left owing. Now you notice that this field is editable. It doesn't have to be. That's an option that you can turn on or off. Some people don't want their customers to part pay an invoice, and if that's the case, you turn that off and they'll either pay the invoice or they won't pay the invoice. It's either full payment or it's no payment. But there are obviously reasons why someone might want to accept the part payment, so this is an option that you can turn on and off. This part down here, this will be a function of what is set up on your merchant account. In our parent company, Global Payments, we'll have this merchant account set up for you. We're very competitive. We are probably one of the biggest payment processors in the world, so we have extremely competitive rates, and we can get that set up for you as well. And so from that perspective, from a customer's perspective, all they need to do is click that Pay Invoice button. This is where we invoke the payment processing screen. So temporarily, this transaction has moved from the customer portal to the payment processing software. It's a product we refer to as PayFabric. So it's PayFabric for Sage 300. We also have the same thing for Sage Intacct, but for Sage 300, this is actually embedded directly in Sage 300 as well. So you can process payments within Sage 300. This is connected to the customer portal, so this is now a means for your customers to enter their card details so that they can make those payments on that account. So from this perspective, the customer just needs to enter their credit card number, and bear with me while I get all the digits in here, an expiry date, and the CVV, whoops, pardon me. And I think I have to put in a name here as well. And they hit that pay button. And when they hit that pay button, what happens now is we send that off to the processing software, and hopefully we get back a positive response saying that we've got the money. So we'll present this on-screen receipt for the customer. If they want, they can print that. You have the option, if you want to also send an email to the customer with this same information. And the email address will be the address that sits on that AR customer record in Sage. We will send it to that email address. So you can send an email address to that, or sorry, an email to that customer with the same information. Internally, you can also get notifications by email. You can get a notification by Slack, or you can get a notification by Microsoft Teams. So if you happen to be using either of those two communication tools, you can be instantly notified this customer has made this payment by any of those methods. So anybody who's on that team, on that channel, on that distribution list in the email can be notified of that. So that's click to pay, pretty straightforward. I just want to get onto this guy here and open up that customer portal. So this is so that was just click to pay. And some people get the product just to do that. They provide that link, the customer pays, makes it easy for them to pay, pretty simple. There's also a full-on customer portal that backs that up. Now you can choose to deploy that or not, that's entirely up to you. All the infrastructure is still there, whether you choose to deploy it or not is entirely up to you. But this is what the login screen looks like for the customer portal. So this part up here, you control this. You just point us to an image file. That's what we're going to put up in that spot there. And if you want some messaging in here as well, as long with your logo, it's quite a bit of real estate we've allocated, so that's fine as well. You also control this welcome message. That's to your customer. It's simple text input on that admin side that I spoke about earlier, and that's going to show up here for you. And by the same token, you will see you've got your address information down here. You control that as well. That's what personalizes it to be your portal for your customers. To get your customers registered, there's a few different ways you can do that. So if you want to completely control it, you can. That's up to you, which means that you will again go into that that admin portal, create the user with a password and all that, send it to your customer, say, here's your credentials for the portal, please change your password on your first login, that type of thing we're all familiar with. That's the most work for you. What I think most people do when they deploy the portal is to let their customer self-register. So they'll go through that similar process, except they're doing it themselves. So they'll create a username for themselves. And they can have more than one user for their AR account. So multiple people at that organization can do this account management on their behalf. So multiple users on one Sage AR account. They do need to know their AR account number, and we do ask them a verification question. And the reason we do that is because one of the options when they go through this process and they hit that register button is if they answer this question correctly, we can give them immediate access to their account. And when that happens, you have the option to send an email, and then again, it's to that AR email address that's on that account inside of Sage to tell them that we've authorized this user to have access to your account. And if for some reason they did not want that to be the case, it's a very simple matter for you to turn that user off, click of a mouse, and you shut that user down. The other option at this point is rather than giving them immediate access, they can wait for you to authorize them to have access once they've gone through that registration process. So that's kind of the three different ways to get a customer registered. Either they do it all, you do it all, or you simply authorize them to have access once they've registered. Once they log in here, let me give you a look at what the customers, are going to see. So the first thing that may happen, again, this is an option that you can choose to deploy or not, is they may see this pop-up message. And where that is stored, that's directly with that customer. So this sits right inside the customer record inside of Sage. So once that pops up, I can show you what that is. In the comments, we've created a comment type called web. And that's this message right here. That's the one that just popped up on the screen here, right? This is communicating you one-on-one with that customer. So something very specifically that you want to communicate to that customer is what you can do with that. So once he clicks OK, what happens? Now, let me just show you what happens here as I move away and back to that record. We've now changed that to web acknowledged, so we know he's seen that message. And you can keep like a string of messages going on here as you scroll down the page. So if there's the first thing that we're going to check, is there a comment type called web? If so, pop it up on the screen. If not, we don't display anything. The next thing you saw pop up here, this is what we call a broadcast message. And this is a message that goes to every customer that logs in. And you control that from that admin portal again that I spoke about. And it's got a start and an end date, and you can turn it on and off. And again, once they click OK, for that particular user, it gets turned off and it won't keep popping up to annoy them. So this is what a full portal with all the options will potentially look like if you choose to turn all these things on. Now there's three different levels of subscription here. There's the standard portal, which is the baseline that you need to have, which includes the account activity, the view transactions, the view orders, and the contact us. One of the optional add-ons is the online payments, which would include pay account, managed credit cards, and prepayment. And then the final add-on option would be the order entry, which is just a quick order entry form that allows them to quickly put an order into the system, and it'll end up in Sage either ready to fulfill or on hold waiting for you to review it, and we can do orders and quotes. So I'll give you a quick look at all of these things so you get a sense of what your customers would see if you choose to deploy all of these functions. So number one, the account activity. This is really just summary level information about their account. Here's my last few payments. Here's my last few invoices. How much do I owe? Who am I, account number, all that basic stuff here. The next thing is when you go to look at the view transactions. Now, we're not asking you to upload anything to our portal nor download anything from the portal back into Sage. That connect component I talked about earlier is what allows us to communicate live and in real time on demand. So when a customer clicks on something, like when I just clicked on view transactions, we went and fetched this data from Sage and put it on the screen. So we actually queried Sage and brought this information back. And here's all the different transaction types or document types that exist inside of Sage 300 for customers. Now, you may not use some of these, and if you don't, you can simply turn them off in the back end. They don't show up here on this list. They don't show up here on this list. But the customer can also choose to filter these down as well. Now, we support both AR invoices and OE invoices, so order entry and accounts receivable. These long ones are AR invoices. These shorter ones, these are order entry invoices. So a lot more detail, of course, in an order entry invoice. There's just a lot more information there available to us that we can put on the screen. And so we'll essentially put on an HTML rendering of an invoice type layout here. And if the customer wants to reprint that, they can do so. We will have this sort of standard layout that will, of course, be your logo here. We do indicate that this is a web copy because we can't hope to replicate everybody's invoice layout. So that just kind of tips your customers off as to, okay, I got this from the portal. That's why it might not look identical to the one that came out of Sage that was either mailed or emailed to me, or however you typically get it to them. And they can save it to a PDF, they can print it, they can do whatever they like with that. And that holds true with any document type that sits inside of Sage. So any of these, you can drill down into them, you can reprint them. All of that is at their disposal. I would say the biggest reason that people get the customer portal is so that their customers can pay them online any time of the day or night, right? You don't have to be open or have someone in the office to accept the call to take a credit card or ACH payment. They can do it from here. And if they've got multiple documents they want to pay, they can do so in a single transaction. Again, you can turn that part on and off, doesn't have to be editable. When they hit that make payment button, it exposes some additional functionality. For example, if your customer wants to store their encrypted card tokens for future use, they can. And by clicking on that and hitting that pay button, the next thing they're going to see on the screen is their receipt, assuming it was a successful transaction. They don't have to enter their card details every time. So that's just a convenience for them. Those card tokens can also be stored right inside of Sage 300 for you to use internally if you're processing directly from Sage. They can also choose to use a new card for a one-time use, and if they want to store that encrypted card token, they just click that save button, hit that make payment button, and again, the screen pops up like we saw with click to pay. They enter their card details, hit the pay, and all this stuff happens in the background that we spoke about. What I didn't mention earlier, and I'm sorry, neglected to do this, when that payment is made from the portal, we actually do take that receipt and append it directly into a Sage AR receipt batch that is there for credit card or ACH processing. So the only thing left for you to do to finish that transaction is to post that batch. So you didn't have to do anything on that transaction outside of post the batch. The customer entered their card details, they chose what they wanted to pay, the software took care of everything else from collecting the payment and getting it to your bank, the physical funds to your bank, and then appending that receipt directly into Sage so the transaction is essentially complete. So if you're doing 100 or more of these things in a month, processing these transactions for customers, you will have paid for the software more than 3 times over probably. And the same holds true on the check or the ACH side of things. It's just a slightly different screen. You just tell us what the account is, the transit number, the branch, all that kind of stuff like you're probably familiar with on ACH payments, and we'll go through exactly that same process. There's a few ways that we could take prepayments in Sage 300. So number one, we can take an unallocated cash payment, and that means it's going to just insert those funds directly into the customer's account, and you're going to apply them at some point in the future. We can take a prepayment on an order, or we can take a prepayment on a quote. So if you happen to be using order entry, or if you're utilizing quotes and you require prepayment, we can accept payments on those 2 document types. Managed credit cards just means I can see what card tokens I've decided to store here. The only thing they can really do with this is to delete it, essentially, just not use it again. But that's about all they can do from this screen. It just shows them which card tokens they've got stored. The view order function is kind of interesting. It exposes some cool functionality. So typically around the status area here. So there's a couple of different ways we can display statuses here. Number one, we can just figure out what's going on based upon what we see inside of Sage. We know if a document's been shipped. We know if it's been partially shipped. We know if it's been invoiced. From the quote standpoint, we can see if it's an improved quote or if it's a quote that's sitting there waiting for approval. If it's in a shipped status, when they click on this icon, what's going to pop up here is all the shipments associated with that order. And if you're putting a tracking number in there, we're going to see that tracking number as well. If it's partially shipped, same thing. We're going to see those partial shipments on that screen as well. If it's been invoiced, where's one that's been invoiced? Here we go. You're actually going to see the invoice document and a link to that invoice document as well. The quote side of things exposes some interesting functionality, and this often goes kind of hand in hand with this order entry screen. So it might be a situation by which maybe you're issuing quotes internally to customers, and they would probably sit here in an approved status already. And so the customer can come on here, they can look at this, they can either just click on the line, it'll sort of expose all the line items, or if they want to drill down and directly see that document, they can do that as well. But if the customer looks at this quote, they says, yes, like what I see, they click on that icon, we can turn that quote into an active order ready to fulfill inside of Sage. So that's kind of a cool bit of functionality. The other way that this might be used is if you're using this order entry screen here. So let's say your customers, you're going to use this for your customers to, rather than place an order, they're going to place a quote. And I think you'd probably deploy one of these, but not both, but you have the option to do one or both. I think in most cases, it would be one or the other, not both. So let's just assume you've just turned on the place quote button. So from a customer perspective, they want to come in here and they want to place an order with you or a request for a quote. Now, we've logged in, we know who they are, we're going to respect the pricing that you set up for that customer, whether it be their specific price list, whether it be volume discount pricing, whether it be sale pricing, contract pricing, whatever's set up for that customer, that's what we're going to honor. Now remember, we don't have any data on the portal. So in order for us to find an item, we can search by a number of different fields. So from the customer perspective, I have to type in at least 3 characters, but we're going to search the item number, the item description. There's 4 additional item information lines in inventory control. We will also search for this information. Or if you happen to be maintaining the customer item number, we will also search that. So let's say I want to find a calculator. I have to either hit the enter key or click that finder. And so here's the 2 calculators that show up. I click that. If there were multiple units of measure in here, I would have a drop down to select the unit of measure I'm interested in. If I'm logged in as a salesperson, I might be able to change that if you want to deploy that, allow them to negotiate. So this is clearly a way that they can just do a quick order, just pop into the quick order entry here and then get that order in or that quote in. If it's an order, it can come in on hold, ready for you to review it before you approve it. If it's a quote, it'll come in there waiting for someone to look at it to approve it. Now, let's say I wasn't entirely familiar with what I wanted to order and I just needed a bit of reassurance that I'm ordering the right thing. Well, let's go through that same process. But now we have a secondary window that pops up that'll show me an image. And I talked about those 4 additional item information lines. We've only got 1 here, but there could be up to 4. They'll display here, and then I can add that to my order as well. So again, this can come in as an order. This can come in as a quote. If it came in as a quote, basically what you might use this side for is it comes in as a quote and it's waiting approval. So when somebody internally reviews it, it would then turn it to the approved status. They could then turn that into an order. So that's how you might use that order entry thing. But this really came into being very early on in the pandemic when people were panicking about how do I deal with my customers? How do I get orders? This can be deployed very quickly. Now, again, we do have our full web store. We can deploy that. We can get them online. It takes time to build, of course, and to configure and to get all that stuff set up. This can be deployed very quickly. It's just that connect component, a little bit of setup, and you're done. Basically, you're in business. So that's essentially the customer-facing side of the customer portal. Again, there's an admin backend. If anyone's interested in seeing that, I'm happy to show it to you. Just reach out to the folks at Bass or even reach out to me, and I will give you a look at that.